Afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here on an absolutely gorgeous, I think it's spring. Is it spring now? I actually have no idea what seasons are anymore. All right. Well, thank you all for being here on a Saturday. I know for sure that it's a Saturday, and you have lots of other things that you could be doing, and you're here. So thank you so much. So welcome to the University of Arizona Museum of Art's Gallery Talk, a conversation with Hank Willis Thomas and Jordan D. Schnitzer. My name is Chelsea Farrar, and I'm the curator of community engagement at the UAMA, and it's my pleasure to get our program started. To begin, I want to respectfully acknowledge that the University of Arizona is on the land and territories of Indigenous peoples. Arizona is home to 22 federally recognized tribes, with Tucson being home to the O'odham and the Yaqui. The university strives to build sustainable relationships with sovereign Native nations and Indigenous communities through education offerings, partnerships, and community service. At the institutional level, we must be proactive in broadening awareness throughout campus and beyond to ensure our students and community members feel represented and valued. Again, thank you so much for being here. Just a quick reminder after today's talk, invite you all, if you haven't already, to go over across the street to the UAMA to visit Hank Willis Thomas Love Overrules. And also a quick shout out on March 6th, we'll be having another gallery talk, a virtual one, March 6th at 5:30 with the artists from the project space. And there's flyer and information in the back. Looks like this beautiful flyer. You can find information on that talk on March 6th. So I'm going to move out of the way. I'm going to bring up Andy Schultz, our Vice President for the Arts and Dean of the College of Fine Arts, who's going to say a few words before he introduces our distinguished guest.
Thanks, Chelsea, and thanks everyone for being here. I'm going to be very brief because you're not here to hear me or Chelsea. You're here to get a chance to listen to this conversation. And if I was going to title this talk, I would have called it 1 + 1 = 3. Because when you put this person together with this person, the alchemy, and I've seen this before, by the way. I had to, in full disclosure, let you know that I do know just how fantastic this is going to be. Because a couple years ago, Jordan, I had a chance to see you and Hank talk at the International Fine Print Dealers Association. It was really an extraordinary opportunity. And so the sum of the parts is much larger than these two people. And I'll just say that what's going to happen here is actually 1 hour of an ongoing conversation that's been going on for at least 6 years. So you're entering into the middle of something, but I'm sure there'll be plenty of handholds and other ways to understand exactly how deep this relationship and important it is to both of you and to all of us who care about contemporary art, care about the art of Hank Willis Thomas. I'm going to just quickly say that Jordan Schnitzer is a West Coast businessman, philanthropist, and art collector based in Portland, Oregon. He's done extraordinary work to share his amazing collection, and I think that's really the theme, Jordan, of your endeavor is to really, it's not about acquiring, owning the stuff, it's about allowing other people to experience it. And that theme of civic engagement, of the role art can play in public life as a catalyst, as a place for conversation, frankly, a way to change the world, I think also runs through Hank's practice. And so I think that notion of the role of art in public life is one of the themes maybe of what draws the two of you together. And in Hank's case, I just wanted to mention, if you're looking for a place to start really digging into Hank's work, there's this amazing catalog published by Aperture in collaboration with the Portland Art Museum, an amazing retrospective. I had a chance to see it, I think, at Crystal Bridges. It was really an incredible exhibition. And I just got this in the mail, the new Four Freedoms book. And I have to just highlight this project for a minute and just tell you, and I want to get this phrase right because it kind of blows your mind when you hear it. Four Freedoms, and maybe Hank, you're going to talk a little bit more about that, or maybe not, I don't know if it'll come up, but Four Freedoms is the largest public creative collaboration in US history. This incredible project to empower artists to design billboards in a whole range of contexts, again, around the idea of public discourse. The other work of Hank's I just want to just quickly mention, which relates a lot to the theme of love you were talking about last night, is the work Embrace, which is in Boston Common, commemorating Martin Luther King and Coretta Scott King, and the fact they met in Boston. If you haven't seen that work, next time you're in Boston, I really encourage you. Every time I've been there, just seeing the celebration that goes on around it, the way it's become a gathering point, and again, a catalyst for conversation is really extraordinary. So I'll leave it there, and I'll turn it to Jordan Schnitzer and Hank Willis Thomas.
Thank you so much. And I know I can speak on behalf of Hank too. We're just delighted that all of you showed up today on a Saturday. And with what Andy said, I'd hope we underpromise and overdeliver. But having heard Hank so many times, once he starts, I hope you're as inspired as I always am. The quick history about me is I grew up in Portland, Oregon, where I still live. My mother opened when I was in the 3rd grade a contemporary art gallery called the Fountain Gallery of Art, focusing on regional artists of Portland, Seattle, and San Francisco. So I was lucky. She opened that art door for me, as I have for my boys, and hopefully all of you for your children, grandchildren, nieces, nephews, and that door has never been shut. So my first love is art of the region. And while I have now one of the largest collections of the most important artists like Hank of our time, I always talk about the importance of supporting local galleries and going to museums, because if we don't support the local artists and just support the giant artists, then we won't have those artists in our midst, and that would not be good, just as we need dance, music, theater also in our communities. So my mother ran the gallery for 25 years, turned it over to an assistant, and I was on the board of the Portland Art Museum. I've been on 20 civic boards, and there was an exhibition of contemporary prints of, again, I'll call the New York School. And I thought, I wanted to stay committed to art of our region, but I thought this might be fun. And I went down and bought a Frank Stella, a Jim Dine, and a Hockney. And prices were reasonable for me. And I went back and bought a few more and a few more. And then very quickly, I was on the board, the advisory board of the Art Museum at the University of Oregon some years before it was expanded and renamed for me. But I went down for an exhibition that they borrowed works from. And I was so excited by seeing all these works, most of which have been in storage. Why storage? Having a mother that was a gallerist, I was there a million times when someone said, "Gee, Arlene, I like this work. I don't have any wall space." And what she said, and I will say to you, is if you go to a gallery, a Saturday art fair, whatever, and something speaks to you, don't pass it up, okay? Store it under your bed, rotate it, whatever. But things of beauty that sort of resonate with us are wonderful to have around our homes and lives. So seeing the work up was amazing. But then when people came in, especially with kids, I felt an elation, a joy, like any of you that have hobbies or activities to share is even more exciting than experiencing something yourself. So we've now gone a little crazy. We've had 180 exhibitions like this at 130 museums. I have 16 wonderful staff, a few are here, that help so much in getting all these shows here. Now, how did we get to Tucson? I'm in the real estate business. I have offices up and down the West Coast where we have industrial and shopping centers and things. And we studied the Tucson market for years and began buying some properties here about 10 years ago. And certainly the university with 52,000 students and 4,000 or 5,000 huge people work there was an important economic force. And one of the reasons that I thought this would be a good market to buy some property. We have 2 warehouses under construction now. We hope those all get leased with lots of wonderful tenants that will help deliver all the goods and services that you all need. But this is a wonderful community, and we're honored and privileged to be here. So when I came here to start examining the real estate market, I came to the university and got a tour, and I said, "Do you have an art museum?" And lo and behold, came on by, eventually met Olivia Miller, the now director, who was a curator and the former director, and said, "I've got a bit of art. Do you want to do a show?" So we curated the Art of Food show here in the Travel Date Museums, and now this extraordinary exhibition. So there you have the whole background. So let's get back to talking about Hank now. What I always find interesting is...
But how did we meet?
Huh? How did we meet? You should tell him.
You tell, then I'll tell.
So there was...
Why did you bring me here?
The Portland Art Museum had a show of his work about 6, 7 years ago, and I was as knocked off my socks as I was walking in last night. I was here a couple of weeks ago and saw them installing the show, and I think those of you who saw the show and those of you who haven't, the treat of a few steps away is going to be an incredible experience for you. And once I saw his work, it grabbed me and shook me up and took me on a journey of heart, soul, mind, and it hasn't stopped since. Then I was lucky enough to meet him, and I said last night, I got emotional. I said, the personal relationship is even more important than the art. He's such a wonderful, wonderful man and friend. So happened again. Anyway.
Thank you, Sherry. That's why I asked.
Anyway, my little boy Simon would say, same, same. But let's go back and talk about your background a bit. You're born in 1976 in Plainfield, New Jersey. Your mother, Deborah Willis, an accomplished, she was a MacArthur winner in 2000 and heads up NYU's photography and eminently respected Smithsonian, whatever. Your father, Hank Willis, a scientist, musician, a real estate man, and certainly if you met them, gorgeous couple, you'd see where he gets his good looks too. Wonderful, wonderful parents. So what was it like growing up in that kind of rich cultural environment?
Yeah, well, thank you, Jordan. Well, it's really great to be here, specifically because I've never been in this building before, and the legacy of CCP has been part of my story for a long, long time. And I'm excited Todd's going to show me a work of my mom's that's in the collection, made of my grandfather's ties. So I'm going to, now I'm going to get to touch my grandfather's ties for the first time in 40 years. And just to think about the importance of cultural institutions like this that record what people see, but also their memories and life experiences, and the fact that I somehow through the circuitous route get to reconnect with one of my ancestors through your love for me and my work is really just really special. We all are, I think, our ancestors' wildest dreams. And when we really, I'm going to go on a Hank before I start talking. Because I was like, Jordan and I were both impressed with all of you all coming here. How many people came here not by choice? So it's, okay, there's one person. So so that means the 99% of you all chose to come here on a Saturday to share air with us. And that means you made at least 1,000 different choices before today to get here at 1 o'clock. Like when you really think about it, like I woke up, I got out of bed this side, I went to brush my teeth, I didn't brush my teeth, whatever. I called somebody, I watched a social media thing, I did all of this stuff. But in the future, I'm going to meet at this point to be with these people, to bear witness to their life experience. And so I want to just acknowledge that you woke up with just generosity in your heart, with curiosity in your heart, and you made countless decisions going back to before this morning that brought you to this moment with all of these people in this space. And the best thing about being an artist is being a beacon, being a living artist, I should say, is that I get to, on rare occasions, engage with people who are curious about the light of my, this little light of mine. I pay a lot of homage to docents and educators who are underappreciated in museum contexts, who do a lot of the person-to-person contact, the greatest advocates for the work. And so I want to thank anyone here who does tell the story of an artwork, interpret it. But I also just want to just remind you all that like none of this matters. None of what Jordan or I do matters if it's not for you all. If it weren't for you all to bear witness, to validate, to acknowledge, to encourage us to maybe do this again. So next time we're gonna have a picture of that one smaller and then this one there. That story really goes back to the values that were embedded in me through my grandmother. Her name was Ruth Willis, and she was married to my grandfather, Tom Willis, who was a very humble woman, a very pious person of very few words, but also very strong. And if she did have something to say, you know that thing that if you don't have anything bad to say, don't say anything at all? She actually lived that, which I don't even understand how she did it. Like the worst she ever, I was like, how are you doing, Grandma? Every time I talk, she's like, fair to Midland. That's like, that was her worst. I was like, that's bad. How you doing? Fair to Midland? Like, I don't even know what that means. But normally she'd say, this is the day that the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad in it. And that to me is a reflection to be in gratitude for every day and every moment we get. And that's why I wanted to start with this acknowledgement of gratitude for you all, and especially for you, Jordan, because you are your ancestors' wildest dreams. And knowing, imagining who's in second, no, you're in fourth grade, or he's in third grade, same age your dad was when his mom started a gallery. And thinking about, she could not have imagined then that your little boys would be here with you, continuing to talk about what she did when she was in third grade. And like I can say, as a person who gets to talk about what my mom did when I was in third grade all the time, how much it's just a chance to love that person who loved you once again, and to share that love and to remind us of all the people who've given us love. And so I just am carrying that little torch in my work. And my mother, as was mentioned, is an art historian and a photo historian, but her work, there was a time when photography wasn't really seen as an art form, and even less that people of African descent didn't have much to contribute to it. My mother was a student at Philadelphia College of the Arts, and was given an opportunity to do an independent study project. And she said she wanted to do a story about the history of Black people in photography. And her professors could name Gordon Parks and Roy de Carava, maybe a couple other photographers. And so someone gave her an assignment. Why don't you, this should be your independent study project. And that was in 1973 or 4. I found the research paper. And in 1986, she published her first book, Black Photographers, 1840 to 1940, a biobibliography. And it was the first kind of catalog of stories of photographs of African-American photographers. And then her next book was Black Photographers, 1940 to 1988. And then she published probably 40 books around visual storytelling of the African-American experience primarily, or experiences related to women. And how many people know anything about American history? I know it's a weird topic nowadays. So in 1840, imagine being a person of African descent on this land in 1840 and deciding, I am going to be a photographer. At a time when it was illegal in most states, this wasn't even a state at that time, to be able to read. Certain people were like, I'm going to learn chemistry and physics and mechanics and apply that to this brand new technology to represent people in the world. There was a photographer, can't remember his name, who was out here. There was an African-American photographer in the 1880s, and my mother, her third book was about him. I can't remember the name right now. But just thinking about that, to me, that tells me that the stories that we've been told about American history are very limited. That there are not one or two American history stories, there are infinite stories. And the person would tell it very different than the way someone else would tell it of them. And so I have been fascinated with framing and context about who gets to tell the story. You know, is it his story, or is it her story, or is it our story? And if it's our story, how do we actually make it benefit us rather than him or her? So my work is really an attempt to broaden our story through my limited perspective, but also challenge the viewer to see themselves in the collective stories that we're making that become our story.
So you went to NYU, got your BFA, then you went to CalArts. Okay.
CCAC, but yeah.
CCAC.
My school changed its name so it could sound like CalArts, which was kind of messed up.
Okay, all
But
right.
one's CIA and one's CA. Okay, but
So when you finished school, has your career followed a path you thought it might, or did you think you'd be doing something quite different than what you're doing?
yeah, so it's funny, like my mom, some of her peers were artists like Lauren and Simpson and Carrie Mae Weems. And I remember telling my mom when I was in high school, I don't want to be an artist because all your friends are broke. So I was not at all interested in being an artist because they were all struggling, and some of them in their 40s and 50s, and couldn't kind of make a solid living doing what they loved. And even if they were acclaimed, now it appears to be very different because history caught up to them. And well, that's not surprising because artists are always living in the future. That we live in a world that doesn't exist every day, making things that haven't been made before. And so I was just like, honestly, trying to not be in the real world. So I went to my mom. I didn't want to go to NYU. My mom made me go to NYU. She's like, I always wanted to go there. After I graduated, 3 years after I graduated, they hired her in the departments that I graduated from. So I like to say I paved the way for her. And then I tried to be out in the real world. I was a photographer's assistant and a production assistant on film and television, and I loved it. And I was like, I like this too much. Like, I like being an assistant. I don't want to be more than that. And at some point, the student loans were catching up to me. And so I was like, I guess I'll just go back to school because you don't have to pay your loans when you're back at school. And so I was literally applied to school on there was 2 schools left, University of New Mexico and CCAC were the last 2 schools that I could apply to. I applied to them. The week I applied to CCAC, my cousin's son, Thomas Willis, was murdered, who said those words, "Love overrules." And so I was applying to school, and he died on a Tuesday. The application was due on Wednesday. So I called the school and said, my cousin just died. They said, we'll give you an extension. And really and then they not only gave me an extension, I got a full scholarship. And my world was different because my roommate, my best friend, who I lived with, was dead. And our last conversation was it was an argument. He was like, I'm going to move to San Francisco. And I was like, I'm going to move to San Francisco. I was like, why are you always following me? Like, that was our last conversation. So I moved to San Francisco with him in my heart, but also with this kind of sense of loss of my family member, of my cousin, and spent the first 2 years that I was in grad school being like, I was mourning. And then I was supposed to graduate, and I was like, well, can I stay and get a master's? And they're like, no one does that. But somehow they let me get an MA in visual and critical studies and an MFA. I was the first person to do it. And the only rule was that you couldn't do both of these degrees at the same time. So I wound up being in grad school for 4 years, that really worked out for me. And so by the time I graduated, I was staff, faculty, and student at this school. But essentially, I got in my job, I was the person who worked in the lecture hall, and I did all the AV for the lectures. So I got to see all of these artists and art historians come and do these talks. So I really feel like I got a PhD in visual culture and art and fine art. And I still didn't want to be an artist. So I graduated grad school, and I had made some work that was like from my branded series, which was about advertising and popular culture. I was really fascinated with the way that advertising shapes our notions of the world. As a person who's been branded as how many people, are you a white man? Are you? It is a trick question.
No, I think we've all seen with the ancestry and the 23andMe and so forth, we're not all what maybe in the past people thought they were, that we're a combination of a lot of different genetic generations.
Yeah, well, none of us are the label. None of us are like, I know that I've been labeled Black and male. And that I've accepted that label is also something for me to point out. However, I don't see what you guys see. Like my world, my ethnicity is you. Like my actual lived experience, the people who I actually engage with, and they are many-hued and very complicated. And I'm fascinated with the fact that someone can create an image that convinces someone that they should fit into a paradigm and then apply their resources to reaffirming this paradigm that may actually not liberate them and connect them to other people. So I was like really in that weird, I was thinking about branding and how slaves were branded as a sign of ownership, and how and now today we brand ourselves. Like I literally can't function in the world without a brand, without a branded um, machine. Like how many people can function fully without interacting with the corporate machine today? That's a very new human experience, less than 20 years old. Think about that, that we have given so much of our agency and our freedom to people to not even people anymore, to things that have never lived. And so what I love about your collection and the artists like Robert Colescott, like Andy Warhol, like Judy Chicago, is they were living in the world. Like we went to Robert Colescott's studio today. Like he didn't have a computer in his studio, in his house. His work, everything he did came from his imagination, from his mind. And I crave that moment. So my work has been, I graduated in 2004 from grad school, and was kind of like wrestling with these ideas of like, how do I become free, in a world that's becoming increasingly corporatized. And a gallery in New York, Jack Shaman Gallery, a guy named, I'm going to tell this story because there are some students here, right? My friend Wyatt Gallery brought me to an art fair called Art Basel Miami Beach in 2003. It was the second year, I think, of this fair. I never knew what art fair was. His friend's mother was working VIP. We go there, we're young, and we see these photographs by an artist whose name then was Sam Taylor Wood. And we walk into this gallery, and there's pictures of her jumping in her studio, really good pictures of her jumping around, looking like she's floating. They're like 60 by 40 inches. And Wyatt gets his self together, and he walks up to the gallerist, and he's like, excuse me, how much are these photographs? And the gallerist says, they're $50,000. And Wyatt said, excuse me, did you say they're $15,000? And he's like, no. I said, they're $50,000. And they're an edition of 7. And we've just published this book of 20 different images of this. And we've sold some to this museum and this gallery and this collector. And we're sitting there like, 20 times 50 times 7. And I was just like, what? And I was like, if her pictures are worth $50,000, my pictures have to be worth at least 1% of that, which is $500, which I understand now that I was selling myself short. But I was like, if I could sell 3 of those
I'll buy.
All right. I was like, if I can sell 3 of those a month, I can maybe make a living. And literally that's how I went from being like, I'm never going to be an artist to becoming a fine artist. And just a few months later is when Claude Simard, who was the co-founder of Jack Shaman Gallery, called me up and asked, he's like, oh, I heard about your pictures. Someone who graduated from the school is working as an art handler at the gallery now. Send me some, I want to see them. I sent him a picture. He's like, well, we think we can sell these for $600. I was like, $600? This is, my dreams are coming true in real time. And so that's my story of becoming an artist.
So I wanted to go back when you talked about your cousin, but we'll come back to that later. But as long as we're on the branded series, we unfortunately didn't sort of cut the images down to just a few. So bear with us. But I learned so much when you talk about these. Explain how this started and talk about.
I don't know if we have any pictures of the branded series in here. We have, this is in the other gallery, in one of the galleries, I don't know the names of the galleries. There's unbranded, a project called Unbranded, A Century of White Women, which is here. But let's see. Oh, so this is part of the branded series. Oops. let's go back. Okay. So these are works I was making originally in grad school. Most of them were photographs, but I was kind of curious, about like, I had this credit card and it was the Chase MasterCard. And I was just like, and I understood there was a relationship with the JP Morgan Chase Bank and the slave trade, I think an antecedent to that bank, but that became this bank, and the American slave trade. And I know that people who tried to escape slavery often were chased. And then I was curious, like, it's the MasterCard. It's like, who is the master? And I was really trying to, and like, am I the master because I have the card, or is the people that I owe money to when I use the card, are they the master? And so I started to make work, kind of looking at these kind of curious names of the credit card. So this is the Discover card, and who knows? Did you know that this is how, at least in Portugal, they referred to the person that we call Christopher Columbus, Cristobal Colon? I just assumed his name, like they were in Spain and Portugal calling this guy Christopher Columbus, not realizing that simple fact. And so I just kind of made these cards, really kind of thinking about kind of how branding can be reimagined to talk about popular culture and our history. And I then I came across some images of, which I'm not going to go back too far, of African American ads that I thought were really strange, and I and I just removed all the advertising information, and I was like, okay, maybe truth is better than fiction. Like maybe I shouldn't be trying to make images that look like corporate products or advertising. Maybe I can just look at that. And so I did this project called Unbranded Reflections in Black by Corporate America from 1968 to 2008. And I think there's 4 images from that series that are in the gallery.
Talk about these.
Yeah, I'm getting there. I know, I'm extemporaneous, is what I've been told. I'm sorry, Jordan. But if I start talking about these, it'll take forever. But so then my follow-up series, I was like, because while I was doing this, I started seeing some images with white women and black men in some of these ads in the 70s. And I thought it was curious because it was not, they were kind of almost equals, or sometimes the man would have more power. And to see images in the night and like that would have been impossible in the 1960s and in the 1940s. And so I just decided I wanted to look in the history of advertising. And race, as you might, I don't believe in race, is literally a fabrication. And gender is fluid. And I recognize that my understanding of race and gender are so much influenced by popular culture. So I wanted to and most people, like when did your family come here?
1905.
1905. And tell that story really quickly. I know.
My grandfather, Sam Schnitzer, grew up in a little shtetl in the Ukraine, a little hut with a dirt floor and an outhouse. 4 brothers. He was the youngest, 8th grade education, apprenticed to an uncle in Odessa, drafted in the Russian army, about to be sent to the Russian-Japanese front, goes AWOL, Germany 6 months, New York 12 months, comes to Portland, where an older brother was, and was a peddler. Went down to Astoria, walked from house to house, picking up old rags, wire, and saved enough money to buy a horse and wagon, sent for a wife. She falls in love with someone else, sends her younger sister. 9 kids later, 7 survived, now, but as poor as you could be. So like all of your ancestors at some point, how lucky we are to be here.
What was his name?
Sam Schnitzer.
Sam Schnitzer. Hey, there's a Sam Schnitzer there. But so when he came to the United States in 1904, he would not have been considered white. It was also Jewish ancestry. And because back then, to be white meant to be Anglo-Saxon Protestant and maybe Catholic, but probably not Irish or German or Spanish or Russian or Armenian or French could pass. um, and but there was this influx of people in this time who were not white, but learned relatively quickly that there was already a second-class citizenry here that they didn't have to like, which were Native Americans and then African Americans in this region, people from mestizo people, that if I could assimilate into whiteness, my family might have a chance. And there were many Black people and Latinx people and even Asian people who also were assimilating into whiteness. But the best way to do it was through popular culture. And so I started to look at kind of how kind of whiteness, which was really taking shape in the United States in a new way in that early 20th century, kind of starts to be represented in advertising, and how white femininity specifically in service of kind of the story of whiteness is something that is built and as a consumer, right? And so I'm fascinated with these ads where I remove the information from them, because you can never tell, once you remove the advertising information, you can't really tell what the ads are for. And so my favorite, and so I took one ad for every year from 1958, not from 1915 to 2015, and removed all the advertising information. And curiously, this one's one from 1936. Some people might be able to guess this one. Cup of O's, I think. Yeah, Maxwell House. And this was, but the Black people in this image happened to not be of African descent. And so, and the Pacific Islander people in this ad happened to not be of that ethnicity. But what happened, the idea, this is for concentrated Dole pineapple juice. But if you get this juice, you can actually be a part of the tropics and have this kind of luxury experience. And so I was really fascinated with like images like this, which kind of suggest servitude and how this is the beginning of the war, right? So you start to see how kind of during these World War II era moments, these advertisements seem to suggest things. Anybody see any? What do you think this is an ad for? And what's this an ad for? Mike? Anybody want to guess what's an ad for? You're going to be wrong. It's an ad for refrigerators. But, you know, this is a time when military technology has large things falling from the sky, I guess. And if you wanted to have like a technology that could actually preserve things that would also, I can't even really understand how this would be that. But so you start to realize that ads almost have nothing to do with the product. And this is an ad from 1945 of, you know, supporting nurses going into the war, being kind of part of the war effort. And this is an ad from 1947.
Talk about this.
And you find, I know, but see, I always forget. Okay, this is because we don't have the image. We don't have the real image here. The advertising image here. Okay, so this is an ad for the pantyhose. And it was using a camouflage material that they developed during the war that could hide nefarious things in bushes. And in the advertisement, it says that now that the war was over, we've applied that same technology to the pantyhose industry, and with these specific scents, and you know, it comes in nude and blah blah blah. And so when I look at this ad, you know, and look at the man who's smelling the roses behind, and it says a lot about kind of how women should feel about their bodies and what they should be hiding, what could be seen as unsightly, and also about how they could be liberated. And so you know, and so these ads, this is from 1950, and so and so what's happened now that women got out of the house during the war for the first time, they're like, wait, and this technology is happening. Like I'm free. And much like what happened with a lot of other people who contributed to the war who were marginalized, they started to say that we're also demand more from the country because they'd offered so much. And
Let's go. Can we go back to the Selma one? I think it's farther before all these.
oh yeah, okay.
Is that
Well, let me
worse?
let me just. I told you, you got me going through these. This is an ad that because it goes. I can talk about each one of these because it was fascinating. Um, what do you all think this is an ad for? You know? No. No. Anybody else? Yes, it's an ad for sweaters. It was in Esquire magazine in 1959, and it said, "Men are better than women. Indoors, women are useful, even pleasant. But on the side of the mountain, there's something of a drag. So don't go hiking them, dragging them up the side of a mountain to show off your new climbing sweater." But what was happening, the subtext of this ad is that women are trying to find their place in the workplace, and certain people don't really like it. And so the advertisements, which once lauded women in a certain way, are now showing a subtle or not so subtle resentment of it, and it's being programmed into us. And what I always want to say is like each of us kind of came online to our popular culture when each of these things happen, and so like our context for the world is related to this. This is one. This is an ad for bras, but she's also happened to be winning an election. So anyway, I can talk about this. This is, and so I'm so happy, and you can see there's a key in the gallery. I can talk about this series forever and ever. And as you can see, and you get to see this evolution and devolution over time, leading up to 2015. But so Jordan was saying I should talk about. Uh-oh. Oh no, I did that. Oh no.
Do the flag one then.
No,
'Cause
you can, because Chelsea, could you find it? It's a mirror piece of a woman being dragged, or that's it. Oh. That up, stop, up, right. No, no. Sorry, down, keep going. There it is, 40. Is this the one you were talking about, or the not one? Oh, oh, sorry, 35, I think. Or, yeah. So this is an image from March, from early March, 1965. This is, when you see it in person, you'll see that it's actually a handmade mirror with a photograph embedded in it, so you'll see yourself and parts of the image. But it's an image from the Selma to Montgomery march for voting rights in Alabama. And for those who don't know, on March 7th, 1965, Sunday, March 7th, 1965, there was an attempt to do this march with the late John Lewis and Hosea Williams and various young civil rights activists who were stopped at the Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma, Alabama, by the Alabama State Troopers and demanded to disperse. And they were practicing their First Amendment right for freedom of assembly, marching along this highway, and did not disperse in 2 minutes, and were subsequently beaten and brutalized by police. But in this case, there were dozens of photographers witnessing it, documenting this, and it went to the worldwide press and really kind of embarrassed the nation. One of the photographers, Spider Martin, created this image, and the response to what became known as Bloody Sunday was that Martin Luther King and civil rights leaders and people from all ethnicities from all across the country, religious leaders, gathered to quadruple plus the number of people contributing to this march. And there were more cameras, and there was therefore much more kind of the eyes on us. And I always found this image so fascinating because this is a person You can see who's marching with mud on his pants and one leg for voting rights that we can assume he felt that were already secured for him. But and to march, think about marching 50 miles on one leg for those other people, right? I think this person is exhibiting a loving thy neighbor, recognizing that the credence of liberty and justice for all, and that even what I can assume is his humble life was a very valuable life to contribute to the broader story of making diversity, equity, and inclusion something that every American can enjoy. And so I find that, because we talk about the civil rights movements, we think about, frankly, just one or two people, most of them Black, most of them male. But those weren't the people who made the difference. The people who made the difference were the people who were unnamed, unacknowledged, who saw the light that certain people were holding and said, okay, we're going to illuminate that till it's impossible to ignore. And so with my work, I'm often trying to, remind myself to be that light, and to, even in subtle and humble ways, to kind of step in that pathway, where I say the road to progress is always under construction, and so we have to build it together. And so this is an example of that for me. And look at the woman next to him. Look at her. You know, look at, and they knew they were going to get hurt. They knew that their lives were in danger. This is not like, this is Alabama in 1965. This is not friendly territory. We're not even comfortable with someone calling us a name that we don't like, And so I hope we can find the courage that they had, because they understood what was at stake, because we need that same courage. And it's not a courage of shouting somebody else down, telling somebody that they're bad. It's a courage of standing in love in the face of hate and adversity, and exemplifying it no matter what the cost.
Can you find the flag one for a sec?
That one's justice. Set. Yeah. Can you? I don't know where it is in the. You might have to exit out. Thank you. Yeah, sure. We can start with justice. Yeah, and so, I did drink the Kool-Aid on the United States of America. I feel a sense of pride and joy every time I look at that flag, even though I know there are many people who see it and they feel exact opposite. But I also know that I can never fully refute it, because it's such a part of everything. Call me brainwashed, but I'm America, heck yeah. But I think this idea of creating a more perfect union is something that we forget about all the time. The United States of America from the beginning was a creative collaboration. They were moneyed people, moneyed men primarily, who owned people, stated contradictorily that liberty and justice was deserved of all, even though at that time women, which was the majority of the population, were not considered women, were not considered people. People of African descent, which were nearly a quarter of the population, were not considered people. And the indigenous people, who were innumerable at the time, were definitely not considered people. But the idea that they were talking about was something that I think I can get behind. And knowing that my own ignorance, like, there's things that I think are cool today that a future me will be like, that was not cool. That was not what you stand for. So I have to understand that my contradictions are no worse or better than theirs. And so these works, like this justice, which is used for, I found some American flags in the a thrift store. They were like on the floor, and I was like, oh, you know, what is this? I didn't know what to do with them, so I just bought them. And I looked at them for a long time, and then I just thinking about kind of navigating our system. How do we get to freedom? How do we get to justice? And so I used the stripes of these flags to make these mazes that to kind of make a metaphor for kind of how difficult it is to get to these to these kind of these goals that we've been marching towards for nearly 250 years, if not longer. And I also think about all of the ways in which we will carry flags and try to use our flag as a way to beat down. But wait, with that flag, I want to talk about that one. No, this one. Yeah. Jordan, like, yeah. Sorry. Is it?
It's about the art and the audience.
Well, the one thing I got to say is just, isn't it sweet how eager he is he's like, talk about that one. Talk about that one. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
We
Yeah.
learn so much when he talks about it.
But does it feel like he's like my uncle or something, or my mom? You know, it's just so proud. It's like you see his legs, you know, it feels, you know, who does that? Like, who cares? Like, he cares maybe more, like, you know what I'm saying? It's really, but this is why the show is called Love Over Rules, because there is, you know, why, coming from your background, who would say that you would find what I talk about in my work something that you would be so interested in, enthusiastic and committed about? Yeah, like why? And it's because I think when we put love over rules, we can break the rules, right? And so this work, which is all of these flags that don't belong together, sewn together in the style of a traditional American quilt, which were often used on the Underground Railroad as a way to kind of get people to the pattern here. If I can't really see it, but I know it's flying geese, and it was, if you're escaping from the south, you would follow the geese to the north, and people would hang flags like that outside, quilts with that pattern outside their house, and to signify that it was a safe house for escaping slaves. And whether we like it or not, we have to embrace our contradictions, our complexities, and recognize that wherever we're growing together. And so this work is attempting to talk about that. And so I think the other piece Jordan wanted me to talk about is the star piece, which I don't know where that is. It's the last one. Okay. I can't, yeah, I can't remember where's forward and backwards. Thank you. So we really love how it's displayed here and at the museum. So thank you to Olivia, and there's a lot of people who worked on this exhibition here. Can the people who worked on this exhibition stand up, please? Students as well. Like, yeah, stand up. You too. I think you count. Thank you. Yeah, you all are making place for this work to have a life, to be remembered, and I want to really say I appreciate that. This is a piece that was inspired by the murder of my cousin and the nearly 500,000 people who were shot and killed in this country since my cousin Sangha, and he was a shining star. He was a North Star for me, and I wanted to pay homage to him in a memorial, and so I did that in small ways, and then I realized that sadly he's just a number in a way, and every year there are over 10,000 people shot and killed in the United States. In recent years, it's been upwards of 20,000 people, and each of them is a star. And so I made this quilt, 2,923, which were the statistics at the time that this was made. as acknowledgement to the 20,923 people who were shot and killed by another person in this country in that year. Sadly, there were nearly 25,000 people who shot and killed themselves in this country in that same time. So there are nearly 50,000 people who are shot and killed every year in this country. And we haven't found a way to talk about it with love and compassion. What does it say about us? That there's more people who want to take themselves out than people who want to take other people out. And that we make it so easy. You know, I do think guns play a role in our society. I don't think you can have any civilization, frankly, without weapons. I don't like them personally, but they've always been a part of it. But are they serving the society? Is the question I think, and how are they serving the society? I think we should be talking about. And if they're harming a large portion of the community, not just the people who die, but for every person who dies, you have to imagine 100 people at least are affected. So we're not talking about 50,000. We're talking about, can't do it. What's, yeah, 500,000 to 1 million people who are affected every year by this. And most of them are not bearing the scars. You know, these are people who died. So think about the people who, the nearly 100,000 people who were shot and survived in this country every year. So I don't know what to do about it, but I feel like as an artist, I can make these memorials. And there's a one that I did with the Mass Design Group that's going to be up at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Detroit in May, because it's important to find ways to honor other people. And so I'm really grateful that you also found it important to add this to your collection, but also to ensure that I speak about it.
I've often said that artists are always chroniclers of our time. They're the ones that face us, force us to deal with issues in society. And boy, if you see these works, I mean, as he was just suggesting, I think we've all become numbed. Almost every other day there's a shooting. And instead of our being as shocked as we once were when these things happen, now you get numb to it. And what does that say about us? So this is a way that I think visually he puts it front and center again for us to go through whatever thoughts we have to try to say, don't forget all those 22,000 individuals, just like everyone sitting in here. That's why you're incredible. Let's do maybe one more work and then open it up to questions from everybody. What do you want to talk about next? Do you want to talk about the...
You choose. Okay. I don't remember. Can you just flip back?
Like the sculpture, yeah, the sculpture outside with the,
Oh,
yeah.
sure. Yeah, also I should say, I talked about how I became an artist. I wasn't like, I'm an okay photographer. Like I'm pretty good. But I wasn't like the best photographer in my 8 years of photography school, and I went to arts high school. I was never like the best. And that's why so I had to make do with other things and find other ways to kind of use my talent, which is really not about applying it to a certain medium, but actually the way that I see the world. And I see the world through the eyes of a photographer who's always capturing moments and attempting to put a frame around them so that other people can see it. And I saw a photograph of Meadowlark Lemon, who was one of the Harlem Globetrotters, basketball players, standing in front of the Statue of Liberty, balancing a ball on his finger. And the metaphor that I saw, and it was in Life magazine, 1986 or something, was to me about how, for many people of African descent, especially, sports was a pathway towards liberty. You know, that thinking about people like Jack Johnson, but even Jim Thorpe, Wilma Rudolph. There were so many examples of people who were not seen or accepted as full citizens in the society, but because of their ability to outperform with grace and beauty, other people were were given a pathway. And then like people wonder like, why are there so many Black people in the BA? Where, you know, but in the younger, in an earlier stage, it was mostly Jewish people. And a lot of times, and now it's increasingly Eastern Europeans, and you see more people of African descent that are not African Americans. Because the more people who are trying to do something, the more likely you're going to have people who look like that being good at that. Is that, and so for many African Americans, the only opportunity from African American men, especially tall ones, to make a life for themselves was through playing a sport. And they saw that as an opportunity for them to have liberty, but also to pass liberty on to generations of other people and family members, and open that and bring it back to us. And so I wanted to highlight that and made this monumental sculpture that's called Liberty. And the arm that I cast of that is of Juwan Howard, who's now the coach of the Wolverines, the University of Michigan Wolverines, but he was part of a team that was called the Fab Five. And I love the idea of kind of using an athlete's, them lending their hand or to actually make this idea become real. And when you see it as a viewer, you see yourself reflected in it, which also to me makes you a part of it.
So time for questions from the audience. Okay.
So thank you all. Can, can we turn the light up, please?
And I have a mic here that I'll walk around with so everyone can hear. What did Juwan Howard think of this?
He bought one.
Yes, I can. I really love the exhibit, so thanks much for your work. I was really struck when I looked at the flag that it was pretty authentic. The stitching on it was very familiar from what I'd seen from American flags. There's I think, an eagle on the top of the pole. And I'm wondering if that was deliberate on your part.
Yeah, well, yeah. So all the flags were embroidered, and yeah, I wanted a flagpole that would kind of root it here. So yeah, that was very deliberate. Thank you.
It's my exercise for today.
Hank, after what you just said about the sculpture, can you talk a little bit about the retroflective pieces and the implication of the viewer in those?
Yeah. So, and when you walk into the gallery and the museum and you turn to the left, there's a really colorful work, and it's called an all-colored cast. And if you use one of the flashlights that's provided by the museum, or the flashlight from your phone, and put it right next to your eye as you look at it, you'll see that this image reveals an ensemble of faces of hidden stars from early Hollywood that would not have been, who are not the first people we tend to think of. I like to make work. If you take a flash photograph of it, you can also see it. I like to make work that kind of, again, challenges the viewer to rethink what they already see, to rethink the surface reading, to know that there's always something deeper.
Okay.
Yeah. 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 So one of the ways in which I actually also worked with this idea of challenging myself or the viewer to shift their perspective is with these lenticular pieces. I think you just passed the one, the powerful, powerless. this is just an example of like, so if anybody remembers or has eaten Cracker Jacks, there used to be like lenticular, and lenticular is a kind of a kind of kitschy form of image making where if you look at something from one angle, you see one thing. You look at something from another angle, you see something else. And I've always found that to be fascinating as a way to about words, frankly, like that one word, when I say powerful, it can mean something different to me than it can to you. But also with a shift of changing that word from powerful to powerless, but also the root of power. So that when a person is walking past it, they'll see 3 to 4 different things, and each of them will evoke a different feeling inside of them if they can read the words. And so another one I think that's there says, believing is seeing, seeing is deceiving. But sometimes when you're walking past it, it'll say seeing is deceiving, or seeing is believing. And really I like to make work that doesn't stay too fixed, that the viewer is always kind of needing to kind of move around and to kind of get themselves located in it if they. And you were right, you did not need a mic. That's like my daughter.
So, Jordan, you mentioned that artists are chroniclers of their times. And Hank, I'd like to hear you talk about how you understand art as a way to understand either the present or the past. What kind of a chronicler do you see yourself?
Well, I don't know if I'd love to not label myself. However, but I also do agree with this because if you think about, if I say ancient Egypt, what comes to mind? It's likely an artwork. If I say France or the Renaissance, like most of what we know about history actually is literally as a result of the art that was left behind and or preserved. And so we don't know what it was like for the average person on a daily, we don't even know how they built the pyramids, right? But we know that it was creative people who did it. That says enough. That says it all. So what even though we might not think of the McDonald's logo as like an artwork or this chair as an artwork, so likely if there is a future society, they will come back and see these things that we have, that our buildings, our artifacts, this mug and this, and be like, okay, who designed this and why? What was the purpose of it? And so what I think is so important for me to do, and why I hope that we can continue to have institutions like this that preserve the art for centuries, is that I'm sending a message in a bottle or in a frame to the future. And this is really directly connects to the story of the foundation, which I think you should speak about.
Do you feel a sense of responsibility that somehow this is a mission that you were fortunate to be there and need to push these themes that are relevant to your life, your history, your legacy?
I do feel a sense of responsibility. I also don't think that my responsibility is any greater than anyone else's. This is just my way of contributing to life and in the world. And most of being an artist is failure. Most of what you do is like, oh, that wasn't good enough. And so whenever there's an artwork that goes out into the world, I always think about like, wow, that was a lot of failure to get to that, right? And someone else, frankly, when a collector buys it or someone curator puts it in a show or someone just tells me they like it, that actually is how I find out that it wasn't a failure. Because, the work, for me, it is only as relevant as it is resonant. And so I'm attempting to make things resonant that also contribute positively to the people's understanding of their own experience and my own. But I get just as much, if not more, from other people sharing their wisdom in whatever ways that they've found that they can.
You know, I'm not personally jealous or envious of others in my real estate business. When I see someone doing some deal, I'll say, wow, why didn't I think of that? Or what can I learn from that? Or how can I get better? On the other hand, if there's one group that I'm a little envious of, if I asked most of you to go in that gallery and put your whole life in, you know, what you've all done, think about what we do. Go back and get little pottery things we made in grade school, this, that, maybe a diary, whatever. But you see these artists, they get to walk in and see decades of their work. So when you walk into an exhibition like this, what do you think? Do you think about what was going on at this time outside of the work, or do you think about the work, or the struggles to do it? What do you think when you walk in and see an exhibition like this? Don't you all want to know that question too?
I frankly, I think that I am loved. It's like, wow, people really care about me or things that I've done. I don't feel deserving, but I feel loved because I recognize, just think about it, like not in just the object, but how the life of each of those objects, from the moment they left my studio, where they went to get framed, where they went after that, where they were stored until they were purchased, where they went after they were purchased, who carried them, you know, all of the, so many hands had touched them to put them up, to get them onto the wall. And so many people planned and thought about that. Whether you got paid or not, that was an act of love, you know? And so I think about, that's what I carry with me. It's like, wow, this thing that I made in, you know, 2003, or this thing that this image that I found on Amazon, that's this ad that I found that you know, like how, you know, not only was, I think the love that carried it through, you know, that's when I look upstairs and to see my work next to all of these kind of amazing paintings and masterpieces, and just like, wow, this is real. You know, it's just wonderful. And frankly, it's even better when it's not in New York, because it's not as pretentious. You know, I feel like in New York, everyone is performing and struggling all the time to be relevant. And you can't be sincere while trying to be relevant. So I know it's cool to be in New York. Sorry to my New York friends. But I feel like we miss a lot of life because we're too busy being New Yorkers to appreciate things. So I come here and I'm like, wow, I really feel, I see myself, right? Whereas if I saw it in New York, I'm like, wow, I'm really, I can believe the hype. But here, it feels so much more sincere and relevant to me and why I make the work.
One thing about our collection is, you know, we've had 180 exhibitions like this all over the country, and we usually have 8 exhibitions like this traveling. And we thought a lot about, you know, what is success with our exhibitions, from my standpoint. And I've not quite, I mean, the town of Pendleton, Oregon, town of 14,000, they have a big roundup I'm a big supporter of, create a scholarship fund for the Roundup Court and the Happy Canyon Indian Princesses. I've helped 270 ladies go to college. We do lots of other philanthropic stuff. But Roberta Lavador, whose ex-husband is a major native artist, James Lavador, does a show every year. Gutsy shows. Louise Bourgeois, Baldessari, Carol Walker, Leonardo Drew, Ellsworth Kelly, whatever. We usually get about 1,400 people out of 14,000. The biggest show we had was 140,000 at the High Museum, the Warhol show. The Hockney show at Palm Springs right now has had 38,000 people already. I don't sit there judging, well, is the High show a better show than the Pendleton show? I guess what I hope is that if just one of you, just one person, walks in there and their lives are forever changed, I've done something good. So the fact of all you being here is wonderful. And it's so exciting to get artists like this work to less served communities. And that brings me great joy, especially artists like this that have had shows at giant museums and so forth. And I think it's resonated with them too, because I think if I were an artist, I'd want to reach as many people as possible and let people hear your art voice and affect them in whatever way you hope it might affect them. So it's really wonderful to be here and have this level of art here. So again, we appreciate all the work that Olivia and all the staff did to get it here. I think there was one more question, better finish up there.
Thank you, Jordan. Thank you, Hank Jr.'s for being here and the CCP as well to hosting it. My name is Anh Thuy, and I have a question for you specifically for the piece, I Am a Man and Be Your Man. It seems very simple statement, at least the way it's structured, but it holds so much weight for us as a human. And I wonder if you could share the memory or what and how you feel when you think of those statements, the inspiration of those, and also how, yeah, like how you feel when you think of those work, those statements within that work. And for Jordan, as a collector or a person who appreciate that kind of work, how those statements affecting you?
Well, Hank will tell you in a second the history of that 3/5, which frankly I hadn't understood, and he'll tell you that better than I. I think my life is filled every day, like all of yours, with all the issues. You know, I remember in my early 20s, you get out of school, finish law school, start working, girlfriend issue, business issue, whatever it was. And I thought, geez, we'll get these solved and it'll be just smooth sailing the rest of my life, right? That's the way it's presented to us, right? And you realize, oh my God, a few more problems come. So the art does a couple things for me. One is, like all of you, I think it takes us away. It's like a little mini vacation, takes us away from ourselves. You know, I've spoken at a number of wealth conferences. And I'll say, you know, when you're lucky enough to have created some assets and you're working with US Bank or JP Morgan or whoever, and you're thinking about trust funds for your kids and grandkids and what to give them and when to give them and whatever. And I have my own thoughts about all that. But I said, you know, in the end, as parents, grandparents, the major thing we want to do is pass on values to our children and grandchildren, nieces, nephews, neighborhood friends, whatever. And I said, in the end, as much as we all wish we had a wand to wave so that our children, neighbor, won't go through all the issues we've gone through, you don't have that wand. They'll all go through the ups and downs of life, loves, sickness, jobs, everything. I said, I think one of the ultimate gifts you can give your children is a passion for the arts, whether it's visual arts, dance, music, theater, whatever. And maybe, just maybe, when they're going through those difficult times, they can go to a gallery, go to a museum, and be distracted a bit and taken away from themselves so they can think and feel, and consciously and unconsciously. And then maybe they'll go back to those issues they have with a refreshed thought about how to get through the life's issues. So for me, the work, I like work that either is pretty and just like maybe some of San Francis's later work, it's like walking through a garden of flowers, or work that just grabs me like his work. Every single work in that exhibition touches me. It just been, and makes me think. And I think part of the challenge we all have is look at the human condition without getting into the politics of our time and so forth. We all would agree how partisan this country is and around the world and so forth. And we wonder sometimes, how does this happen? How do you have a Putin that just decides to take over a country? I mean, how do we have a Hitler, a Mussolini, a Genghis Khan, or whatever? There are parts in all of us that maybe aren't so good. And the good part has to keep those other parts in balance. The jealousy, the envy, the hate, the racism, all these things. And art is a way, at least for me, and I think for many of us, that helps us focus on our values, and are we living the values we think we have or should have. But talk about that piece, because it's pretty powerful. And I think the way it was exhibited here on that wall is as good as, if I were him, I couldn't imagine it being presented any better anywhere. That's a credit to the staff and the curators here.
Thank you, I agree. And so this is part of a series of paintings inspired by a protest sign that was popularized during the Memphis Sanitation Workers March in April of 1968. Um, it was offering his support for these sanitation workers who were um, protesting for the right to um, share facilities with their colleagues, to share the lunch table, that Martin Luther King was assassinated. And the famous photograph by Ernest Withers is of dozens of sanitation workers holding the signs that say, "I am a man." And the photograph was taken just 8 years before I was born. And the phrase I grew up with wasn't "I am a man," it was "I am the man." And I found it so fascinating that during this segregation moment, people were speaking about themselves collectively. And post-segregation, people were talking about themselves as the center, so to speak. And then I was like, okay, well, what if I can just remix that text? I'm a man. I thought about Sojourner Truth, ain't I a woman? Be a man, you the man. All of these kind of riffs I came up with, and so the ones that are in the gallery, I am 3/5 of a man. References the United States Constitution, which says that people of African descent would be counted as 3/5 of a human being, so as not to give too much weight to the northern states that didn't have as many slaves. Um, to the southern states that had population that didn't they didn't want to fully count. Let's just say. I don't remember. So I am man is one that's there that really to me speaks to this concept of humanity. And how the removing of one article can take it from being about one individual to being a many. And so I really like the idea of taking basic, simple things and making subtle changes that can challenge myself and viewers to rethink their relationship to them. And I saw that Cooper had a question. This is Cooper Colescott, who hosted us at his home today, or his father's former studio.
Thank you. Hank, I was going to ask, how do you come up with all the ideas for the different mediums that you use? I mean, with the reflective and the hidden images, and I mean, do you start with the medium in mind and then come up with the idea for the basis of the work, or is it just depend on the work and your ideas too?
Well, I start with ADHD, which I was never diagnosed because my mom wouldn't give me a test, but I had in my 40s, just like, why am I like this? Like, oh. And so I can't focus. I'm like, oh, this is really interesting. You've seen me talk, so you know. So I'm always, everything is fascinating to me. And so if I see something that's unique or that I haven't, or a material, I'm like, or I see an artist worked with something, like, oh, wow. What if I tried that with this thing that I know that I've been thinking about? And oftentimes there are vendors like with lenticular prints who are used to just doing like billboard signs. And so like, I remember one time I called a vendor and I said, I wanted to do this text black on white that did this. He was like, not only can't I do that, I won't do that. And he just hung up. Because what I like to do is I like to go to somebody who's like a master at a craft and say, okay, can we just break it? Because that's how you make it art. And so I think with me, with a lot of my work, I'm trying to like take things that are fixed in a way and trying to and seeing what happens when we apply a totally different methodology to them. So thank you for your question.
So let's wrap things up. I just want to quickly thank everyone for joining us, making those thousands of choices that brought you here that Hank talked about. The museum is open until 4:30 today, so strongly encourage you to have another look, and also to go forth into the world and bring back your friends, your families, people on the street, anyone you encounter to come see this extraordinary exhibition so that we can have that impact that Jordan was talking about. And of course, thanks to the two of you for allowing us to have a glimpse into this latest chapter in the ongoing conversation I talked about. It was really, really a wonderful afternoon. So thank you both very much.